everyone, this is Cheryl from the Sewing Basket in Plymouth, Wisconsin, here on April 29th for our daily dose. Yesterday when we showed you the fabric, we told you that we had planned on doing a little project with a self-mitering blanket. So we're going to be doing that today because yesterday we got to look at brand new fabric. So this little project, it really only consists of two fabrics. You got a 30-inch square for your top piece and a 40-inch square that is going to be your back, and then it comes around to create about a 2-inch border on the front, and then your corners are mitered, and that is all done just by the way that you sew it. So we're going to go through all the little steps that there are to it. It's not very hard, but there's just some little things that if you do them, it will make it go much faster. So we are going to be posting a little instruction sheet. I don't really want to call it a pattern because there's not a whole lot of graphics except talking about that mitered corner, but I really didn't think you needed a whole lot of graphics. Pretty much it's cut a square and then cut a bigger square and then put a couple markings and pin and sew. So you should be able to handle that. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not. So we'll keep going. All right, so I'm going to set this one aside. So again, you're going to have a 30-inch square of fabric, and this is going to be the fabric for the top of my little blanket. And I call it a blanket because I don't really think of it as a quilt. We aren't piecing anything. We aren't really quilting it except for a top stitch when you're done. So I think of it more as a little blanket. So, and then for our back piece, it's going to be a 40-inch piece of fabric. So you're working with two squares. And before I get started, one of the first things you need to do is on both of these fabrics, I need to find the center on all four sides. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And on this one, I need to find that center point and mark them on both fabrics, all four sides. And then the biggest thing that a lot of people like to skip, but to me it's the most important one, is in your corner, and I'll hold this up. Is that okay?
Yeah, a little closer.
You want to mark the 1/4 inch mark in that corner on all four corners, only on the piece that's your top fabric. So in order to do that, I'm going to take a ruler, and I'm just using a ballpoint pen so you guys can see it, so it's a little darker. Sometimes you really got to look because a lot of times there's not a line, but I just want to find that point where my 1/4 inch from my side and my top meet. And I'm just going to lay that 1/4 inch right in the corner, and I'm going to mark around it. Okay. And where that little point is going to be really important for where I start and stop my sewing of my seam. A lot of people just eyeball the 1/4 inch, but I think it's way easier and comes out much nicer if you just take the time to mark those four corners before you start. All right, so now we're going to take our backing fabric. It doesn't matter which direction it goes because it's square. And I'm going to lay my top piece right sides together, so we got all of our pretty sides touching. And now what I need to do is I need to find the center of this fabric and the center of my back, and I need to pin them or clip them together. So you can use pins. You got to be careful not to be poking yourself as you're going back and forth to the sewing machine. The other thing that's really nice is these little mini clips. So this end is about half the size of the original Wonder Clips. These are the mini Wonder Clips. So these work really well too, and they're a little faster, and you don't get quite so much blood on your project. So I'm going to put a couple clips in there. And when I put my needle down, I want to be right at that intersection, so I don't want to have a clip real close to there. And then I'm going to put a couple clips on the other side. And then I need to do the same thing on the opposite side of the fabric. So I'm going to go over to this side now. Again, I'm going to match my two centers and clip them. And seeing as we're live here, I'm not going to make you sit and watch me sew all of this. So I've prepped it, and now I would go to my sewing machine. Again, I would start right at that little intersection. I like to do either a tack stitch or a back stitch, and then I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch, and I'm going to end exactly at that little point where I marked that 1/4 inch. So I do my two opposite sides first. You can try to pin everything all at once, but it gets kind of bulky, so I find it's easier just to solidify, nail these down, and then come back and do the other sides. So I'm going to go to a different sample for that. So here I have another sample. So I've already gotten these two sides sewn, and I'm going to go back to this one for a second. So usually I use one flannel and one cotton, but it really doesn't matter which piece is which fabric. So on this one and the one that I just was putting the clips on, my back was a flannel and my top was a cotton. On this one, I have a cotton for my back, and then I picked this cute little flannel for my front. Okay, so it doesn't matter. Kind of, sometimes you find the cute print. You can also do flannel to flannel. You can do cotton to cotton. That's going to be the last thing I show you, and there's a little trick to working with that. So once I have my two sides sewn, and again, I have this little corner is not sewn down, then I need to do the same thing, and it's kind of funky, but I'm going to start by matching up that center, and then you just kind of lay it so it goes nice and flat, and you get this little dog ear, rabbit ear, whatever you want to call it, off to the side. So you're just going to lay it flat and do a couple clips. And then I would do the same thing on this side. Okay. And do my clips. And now I'm going to turn it, see if Elaine can show you. When I go to my machine, I want to make sure this is nice and flat. And again, I want to put that needle down right at that corner so it's kind of in the same spot that my first seam was. Then I'm going to sew all the way across, and I'm going to end at the corner on the other side. All right. So I already had that done on this side. So there's my seam, and here's my little ears that kind of stick out on either side. And I started and stopped right at my corner. Now comes the trick for getting that miter, okay? So what you're going to do is I want to take from this corner, if you kind of grab it right in the point, and fold it so that your raw edges meet. Okay, so basically I'm folding it so I got a 45-degree angle going here. And working with a 12-inch ruler is really nice because I need to lay the ruler at this point where I was always starting, and I want to pick one of the lines on my ruler and put it along that 45-degree folded edge. If I have a little bitty ruler, if my ruler isn't long enough, I got my edge here and I don't have any ruler up here. So working with something that's at least 6, 8, 12 inches works nice for this project. So again, I want the edge of my ruler to be right where I was starting and stopping. And then I want one of my lines to go right along that folded edge. And then I'm going to mark this line. Okay, just like that. Okay, now one of the things, and this is on my little paper, this is the diagram that I've given on here, that this is your folded edge and you want that ruler line to lay along here. if I would happen to put my ruler here and lay my ruler edge along my raw seam and draw the line here, I'm not going to get that mitered corner. It's going to be going in the wrong direction. Okay, so you have to really make sure that you're putting it on that folded edge and starting right at that intersection. So I did it here, and I typically put just a little pin in here to hold this. Oops. So when I go to the sewing machine, it won't move. Then I'm going to flip to my next one. Again, I grab the little ear, kind of hold it, pull my sides so they match, and I kind of shake it so that that piece inside is laying nice and flat. You don't want to catch anything in that seam when you sew it. Put my ruler on there, find my starting stopping point, twist my ruler so that one of my lines is going even with that folded edge, and I'm going to draw. Okay, so I would just do that on all four sides of my quilt. Then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew right on that line. Okay, so you can mark all four corners and sew all four corners at the same time when you do this part. Okay, so now I'm going to grab a different sample. So once I have, this one's a little bit smaller, once I have all four corners marked and I sewed my line, now I can come back with the scissors and I can trim this away about 1/4 inch from my stitch line.
Would you like a larger scissors?
Yeah, maybe that would be good. I feel like I'm in kindergarten here with this little thing. Thank you. Oh, and one thing I forgot to tell you, which I forget to do every time, on one of your sides you need to leave a hole to open it. I get so excited about sewing I forget to leave that hole. And if you do that, it's because actually on this one I forgot to do it. So before I rip it out, I just find 2 spots and I do a little bit of a tack stitch, and then I just pull out those couple stitches. But you do want to have a back stitch there at that opening, otherwise as you're trying to pull it through, it'll want to rip out. We all do it. Alright, so I got my 4 corners cut off. When you leave your hole, make it big enough that you can get your hand all the way in there. Some people like to have this tiny little hole, and all you're doing is putting a lot of stress on that seam in your fabric. Get your hand in there and then go to your farthest corner and kind of grab it between your thumb and your finger and pull it out. It makes it much easier rather than trying to start right at the edge and work everything from that back corner up. Alright. So now when you flatten this out, get my hand in there. Here I'm going to have, there is my mitered corner. You see that? All right. And I'm going to get a little turning tool in there and work that corner out nice and flat. But it's just going to automatically turn and be a mitered corner. Okay?
Cool.
So this one, this is, we're going to talk about the sample a little bit. This was a panel that we have, and it's got 4 of these little animals on it. Oops. So this is the panel. Okay. So I just cut the 4 animals apart because, you know, the instructions I've always seen is working with a square, and they work with that 30-inch square and the 40-inch square. And I think the main reason for that is that you don't need to do any piecing of a back. A 40-inch square is about as big as you can get from a 1.25-yard piece of fabric. And then you always want your back piece to be 10 inches bigger than your front piece. So if I had a 40-inch back, I needed a 30-inch front. So when I was playing with this, I cut this, and it was basically the size of a fat quarter. It was like 17 by 21. So I had to add 10 inches to both directions. So my 17 by 21 turned into 27 by 31. If I did my math
You
right.
did good math.
So to do these smaller ones, you can have a fat quarter, and 3/4 of a yard makes these kind of little tag-alongs. Now this one was also 2 cotton fabrics, okay? And it can be kind of wimpy if you don't at least have that flannel in there. So on this one, I took one of our fusible battings. So this is by Quilter's Dream, and it's got a fusible glue, a heat-based glue already on one side of the batting. So I fused that batting to my back piece, my larger piece. I put a fusible batting on there. So now when I flip it, you know, my edges will actually have 2 layers of batting, which give them almost a little bit of loft, and I have a nice soft inside because of that batting there. Otherwise, those 2 pieces of cotton just are a little thin and hard. So once I have this done, and I have it flipped, and I have all my corners punched out, so I'm going to take it and I'm going to iron it real well, get it nice and flat, get everything laying straight and even. And then I'm going to find the decorative stitch on my machine, and I'm going to stitch around at this seam. So it's nice if you find a decorative stitch where the needle goes left and right of center on your stitch, so like a little feather stitch or something, that a serpentine stitch that curves back and forth, because then you'll catch both sides. If you try to do just a straight stitch in the ditch, you can never stay perfectly on one side. And you know, for here, would I put in a white thread and it would get on the red, or if I have a red thread, it's going to get on the white. Where if I pick a stitch that's meant to go left and right of center, you don't see it, you can't eyeball it and tell if you've gotten off a little bit, where that straight stitch is not very forgiving. And when I'm doing this stitch is when I'm just going to close this little hole in here. So I would fold it, and actually I'm going to grab, this was my original one. So here you can see I just have 2 pins in there. So when I fold it, if I fold it so that my seam goes towards my flannel or towards my border, it'll help lay flat and it'll keep this piece flat. If my seam is going towards my center, then my center piece wants to roll this way, and it's a little tougher to get that to lay flat. So work it with your fingers that your seam is going underneath your border piece, and that'll just make it a little easier to get everything nice and even and lined up. And just put a couple pins in there. You could use a Roxanne glue base. Some people, if you can put a little piece of heat and bond, something to hold that in place, and then you're just going to stitch that shut when you do your little decorative stitch around it. You can add more stitching into your center if you want to, but you don't have to. So that's what we have for today with our daily dose. This was an older design. A lot of people, I've seen it years ago, so many of you may have said, oh yeah, I've seen that. Some of you may say, oh, I remember that, but I forgot how to do it. And then there's a lot of you that are new to quilting that may have never seen this method. So really, once you get the hang of it, you can kind of crank one of these out in about an hour or 2 if you have some pieces of fabric sitting at home. So I hope you enjoy that. Again, Elaine will get this little instruction sheet up on the website along with the video. And today is Wednesday, so we'll be back tomorrow.
One thing, you talked about some kits.
So we weren't sure if, people were looking at what we were working with. So we thought we could make up some kits for these. If you're interested, we could, you can either call or we'll maybe put them on the website. This one, if you wanted to do all 4 of them, you would need 3 yards of fabric for your backing. One of these little battings would be enough to do all 4 of them, and a panel. So those are some options. So if you're interested in that, you can either send us an email or give us a phone call, and we'll get those out to you. All right, we hope you have a great evening, and we will see you tomorrow.
See,
Bye.
see you tomorrow.